They said Whispering Pines Sanitarium was cursed, a place where madness lingered long after the patients had gone. For decades it stood forgotten, its crumbling facade buried in the heart of a forest no map dared name. Locals whispered of strange sounds, shadows that moved on their own, and visitors who vanished without a trace. But for Liam, Sarah, Jake, and Mia, it was a thrill, a chance to uncover the mysteries behind the stories. They didn't believe in curses. Not yet. By the time the sun sank beneath the horizon, the forest around them seemed to breathe. And as they crossed the threshold of the sanitarium, a chill ran down their spines. None of them noticed the faint words carved above the door, "Once you enter, you will never leave." Deep in the remote heart of a dense forest lies the desolate ruins of an old sanitarium, where the boundary between the living and the dead is dangerously thin. It started with a dare. A group of 4 urban explorers, Liam, Sarah, Jake, and Mia, decided to venture into Whispering Pines Sanitarium, a place abandoned decades ago after a series of grisly deaths. They arrived at dusk, the towering pines surrounding them like silent sentinels. A mist clung to the ground, and the wind carried faint, almost imperceptible whispers. The sanitarium's doors hung ajar, creaking slightly in the cold breeze. Inside, the air was suffused with the scent of mildew and decay. The explorers' flashlights illuminated peeling wallpaper, rusted gurneys, and dark stains on the floor. As they ventured deeper, a guttural hum seemed to emanate from the walls, growing louder with each step. They reached the main hall, a cavernous space filled with overturned furniture and scattered patient files. Sarah picked up a folder and read aloud, Subject 27. Unresponsive, violent episodes. Claims to hear voices. Just as she spoke, a loud bang echoed behind them. Their flashlights swung to reveal nothing but the faint impression of handprints on the dust-covered walls. A set of stairs led to the basement, where the whispers grew louder, almost forming words. Against their better judgment, they descended. The basement was colder, the air thick with an indescribable heaviness. A door marked morgue loomed ahead, and as Jake pushed it open, the lights on their cameras flickered violently. Inside, the shadows seemed to shift unnaturally, as if watching them. Mia screamed as she spotted movement, a shadow darting across the room, though there was no source for it. The group huddled together, scanning the room with trembling flashlights. Then, from the far corner, a shadowed figure emerged, indistinct but humanoid. Its head tilted unnaturally as if observing them. Suddenly, the room plunged into darkness, and the whispers crescendoed into a deafening roar. Panic set in as the group bolted for the stairs. Liam tripped, and as the others turned to help, they saw shadowy hands reaching out from the walls, clawing at him. They managed to pull him free, but his arm bore deep scratches. The sanitarium seemed alive now, the walls pulsating and whispering their names. As they reached the exit, Sarah noticed a plaque near the doorway, dedicated to the patients who never left. Below it, their own names were etched, as if waiting to be completed. The door slammed shut, and the last thing they heard before darkness consumed them was the whispering chant, "Stay with us." Days later, authorities found their abandoned vehicle outside the sanitarium. Inside, there were no signs of life, only the explorers' cameras still recording, and faint whispers that played when the footage was reviewed. Weeks passed, and no one dared venture into Whispering Pines to search for the missing explorers. The forest grew silent, save for the occasional whispers carried on the wind. Then, one night, a hiker passing near the edge of the woods heard something strange. Faint voices calling for help. Against his better judgment, he followed the sound, reaching the sanitarium's front gates. There, he found an old camera lying in the dirt, its battery somehow still charged. He pressed play. The screen flickered to life, showing 4 terrified faces surrounded by shifting shadows. Their panicked screams echoed into the night as the final frame froze. The doorway of the sanitarium, where 4 new names had joined countless others on the cursed plaque. The old Victorian mansion loomed at the end of a winding road, tall and foreboding with its creaking iron gate and ivy-covered walls. The Whitaker family had seen potential in the house's crumbling grandeur, dreaming of restoring it to its former beauty. As soon as they stepped inside, the house felt like it was holding its breath, as if anticipating their arrival. The first few nights went by without a hitch. They laughed over creaky floorboards, loose doorknobs, and shared ghost stories around the fireplace. But on the fourth night, as the clock struck midnight, the house came alive with an unsettling sound. It was a whisper, soft and almost indistinct, but unmistakable. It slid through the air, curling around corners, slipping beneath doors and finding its way into their rooms. A single phrase, hushed and barely audible, reached all their ears at once. "Come closer." The Whitakers were a practical family, and though unnerved, they brushed it off. Their eldest daughter, Emma, joked that maybe the house was eager for company. But every night, the whispers grew stronger, more insistent, and more specific. "You don't know what you found. We've been waiting." As they continued their renovations, they started discovering strange remnants of the past. A crumbling leather-bound journal hidden in a hollow wall, covered in strange symbols and faded names. A child's dusty doll tucked beneath the floorboards, its glass eyes staring vacantly. And, in the attic, a door painted black, its handle cold as ice and immovable as stone. One night, as the whispers grew louder, each family member found themselves drawn into the same room, a small library on the second floor with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a large, cracked mirror. As the clock struck midnight, the room filled with whispers louder than they'd ever heard before, swirling like an invisible storm, pulling them deeper into a trance. Then, the whispers shifted, speaking directly to each of them, sharing secrets no one else could know. A mistake Robert Whitaker, the father, had made in his youth, something he had buried deep. A betrayal from Elizabeth, the mother, that only the walls seemed to know. And secrets for Emma and her younger brother Will, things they'd never told a soul. Shaken, they left the room, but a chilling realization was taking hold. These were the memories of someone watching them. The whispers weren't warnings. They were intimate, luring, inviting. The family tried to shake off the haunting feeling, but each night, the voices called them back. They spoke in the voices of children, then adults, sometimes anguished, sometimes joyful, as if the spirits were reliving pieces of their lives. They told tales of lavish parties, of love and laughter that had once filled the house, until they reached the final, haunting tale, a Halloween night when the last family disappeared. The whispers grew frantic as they recounted the night, echoing through the halls, as if the walls were screaming their memories. Emma, the oldest, pieced it together. The previous family had been celebrating Halloween, just as they were. It had started as whispers for them, too, an invitation to join the house until they had all disappeared. That night, as midnight approached, the Whitakers found themselves irresistibly drawn to the black door in the attic. It opened as if waiting for them, the handle warm this time, beckoning. Inside, a candlelit room stretched before them, with a single, elegant dinner table set for 4. Each place was marked with their names, written in fine cursive on old-fashioned parchment. The whispers hushed as they entered, and instead of voices, there was now a soft, spectral presence. Shapes flickered in and out, figures in vintage clothing who seemed to fade as soon as they were noticed. The Whitakers sat, entranced, watching the figures grow clearer, until they saw the last family, seated exactly as they were. The figures turned, smiling, reaching out across the table to them, but there was something empty in their eyes, a hollow, endless hunger. A shiver ran down Elizabeth's spine, and she tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't move. Robert reached for her hand, but it felt heavy, like lead. Emma and Will looked at each other, terror dawning in their eyes as they tried to push away from the table, but an invisible force kept them in place. And then the whispers returned, only now they were inside their heads. "You're home now," they cooed, soothing, relentless. Forever. The next morning, the house stood silent. All signs of the Whitakers were gone. Their belongings remained, scattered and untouched, as though they had simply vanished. The town whispered about the disappearance, adding it to the house's growing legend. And eventually, another family came to see its beauty and potential. And the house waited. Its walls held their breath once again, waiting to whisper its secrets anew. Years passed, and the mansion stood silent once more, the dust settling into untouched corners, the walls holding their breath. The town's residents whispered stories about the house on the hill, claiming they'd seen lights flicker in the attic, shadows moving in empty rooms, and the faintest sounds of voices late at night. No one dared to go near it. But one Halloween, a young historian named Caroline came to town, drawn by the rumors. Unlike the others before her, she wasn't looking for a home to restore. She was looking for answers. Carolyn had spent years researching mysterious disappearances tied to the mansion, and was determined to uncover the truth behind the legend of the Whispering House. Late one evening, armed with only a flashlight, she stepped through the mansion's towering front doors. The house seemed to welcome her, a subtle creak echoing as the door closed behind her. The air was thick, heavy with anticipation, as if it recognized her presence, recognized her purpose. She began exploring, her flashlight casting eerie shadows along the faded wallpaper and cracked mirrors. Midnight struck, and right on cue, the whispers began, winding through the walls, calling her name. "Caroline!" The whispers were more intense than she'd expected, but instead of fear, she felt a strange pull, a connection. She moved toward the attic, where she knew the heart of the house lay. The black door was already open, candlelight flickering inside as if it had been waiting for her. As Caroline entered, she saw the table set, just as the stories had described. But this time, something was different. Around the table sat faint apparitions, shimmering figures with hollow eyes and mournful expressions. She recognized them from old photos she'd seen in her research, the Whitakers, the Mitchells, and other families before them, each one trapped in the same eternal cycle. With a tremor of realization, she understood that the house was a prison, binding souls within its walls, feeding on them to sustain itself. But the house didn't just want to trap her. It wanted her to join them, to sit at that table, and to bind her life to its dark legacy. But Caroline was prepared. She'd come with something the others hadn't. A small, ancient key she'd found buried in an old town record, an artifact said to hold the power to break curses. She pulled the key from her pocket, clutching it tightly as the whispers grew frantic, pleading, desperate. "No. Stay. Join us." The figures around the table reached out to her, their hollow eyes filling with an aching sadness, a longing to be free. Caroline held up the key and spoke the words she'd memorized, an incantation of release. For the first time, the whispers screamed, a piercing wail that echoed through the house, shaking the walls as if the very foundation were crumbling. One by one, the figures began to dissolve, their expressions shifting from anguish to peace. The Whitakers smiled faintly before vanishing, followed by the Mitchells and then the others. Caroline felt a wave of warmth and relief as the spirits found release, their souls finally free of the mansion's grasp. And then, as the last whisper faded into silence, the house itself seemed to exhale, a final, defeated breath. The candles flickered out, the walls creaked, and the oppressive weight that had hung over the mansion lifted, leaving it hollow, empty. Caroline left the whispering house just as dawn broke over the hill. She glanced back once, seeing the mansion in the soft morning light, now an ordinary, crumbling relic with nothing left to hide. Its power was broken, its whispers silenced. She knew the town would still tell stories about the house on the hill, but now, those stories would end. The house would never whisper again.